She walked into the gym wearing second-hand sneakers, carrying a bag held together with duct tape, and within minutes, the reigning world champion laughed at her like she was a punchline. But what no one knew, not the cameras, not the crowd, not even the arrogant boxer who mocked her, was that this quiet young woman had fists shaped by survival and reflexes honed in street fights no referee ever saw. They called it a friendly spar. She called it the last time someone would mistake her silence for weakness. And in 3 unforgettable rounds, she didn't just win the fight. She rewrote the rules of who belongs in the ring. This is not a story about revenge. It's a story about dignity, about what happens when the most underestimated person in the room turns out to be the storm. Some stories don't begin with a bell or a title shot. They begin in silence, quiet, sharpened by humiliation before the first punch is ever thrown. This one begins in a gym, not the kind with mirrors and memberships, but the kind where sweat becomes survival and pride gets tested in front of strangers who already think they know your place. Picture this: a sleek, elite boxing club in downtown Manhattan, where the walls are lined with championship belts and egos hang heavier than the punching bags. This isn't a place built for second chances or underdogs. It's a temple for the already anointed. And into that sanctuary walks a girl named Amara Lewis, 18 years old, barely 110 pounds, dark-skinned, listening from a long walk in borrowed shoes, clutching a duct-taped duffel bag and holding nothing but a phone screen confirming her scholarship acceptance. She isn't a name here. She isn't anyone. And standing in her way is the undisputed queen of the gym, Cassandra, the Titan. Vale, 2-time world champion and full-time social media firestarter. Cassandra doesn't build her legacy in silence. She thrives in spectacle, in taunts, in the kind of arrogance that bleeds through every Instagram post she writes. When Amara walks in, Cassandra barely lets her take a step before sneering. Looks like someone wandered in from the wrong side of the city. Scholarship here? Sweetheart, this isn't a charity. Around them, the room quiets, not from curiosity, but from anticipation. Because when people like Cassandra smell vulnerability, they don't retreat, they pounce. And Amara knows this. Look, she's seen it in schools that underestimated her, on subways that turned their backs on her, in job interviews where her accent became a disqualification. But there's something about this moment that's different. Because this time, Amara isn't just here to survive, she's here to test herself. Cassandra proposes a friendly sparring match. 3 rounds, just a taste. If Amara can last, she can stay. If she can't, well, she'll be the latest addition to Cassandra's humiliation highlight reel. It's not just a challenge. It's a public gutting, dressed up as sportsmanship. The type of thing that happens all too often in elite spaces, when newcomers dare to exist. But Amara doesn't flinch. She looks Cassandra in the eye, nods once, and says with startling calm, "I accept." And in that moment, something shifts. Because beneath Amara's quiet demeanor is a story no one in that room knows, one that began thousands of miles away, in the dust-choked backstreets of Montego Bay, Jamaica. Back then, they called her Shadow Strike. She never wanted that name. It was given to her after a match where she knocked out a local champion in 4 hits before he even landed one. But fighting wasn't about pride or glory. It was about survival. Her father gone, her mother sick, her fists became her tuition, her rent, her grocery list. By the age of 13, she'd seen more bruises than birthdays. She left the ring when she earned her visa, left behind the underground scene, and promised herself she'd build something new, clean, respectable, far from blood-stained mats and men who bet her worth with crumpled bills. But now, standing in a gym dripping with privilege, staring down, a woman who didn't just doubt her but laughed at her presence, she feels something stir. Not rage, not fear, hunger. The kind of hunger that elite fighters lose once the contracts start rolling in. The kind of hunger that never sleeps because it was never fed. That's what makes this moment so terrifying, not for Amara, but for Cassandra. Because Cassandra is about to fight someone who doesn't care about the crowd or the cameras. She's about to face someone who isn't here to entertain, but to remind. Amara doesn't need to prove her worth. She's already done that. But what she's about to do is remind everyone in that gym why underestimating a woman who's had. To fight for everything isn't just foolish, it's dangerous. And here's the twist no one saw coming. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about dignity. Because Amara didn't come to Manhattan looking for a fight. The fight found her. And now that it has, the rules are about to be rewritten. The gym smelled of sweat and bravado. It always did. But this time, there was a new scent in the air. Doubt. It didn't come from Cassandra Vale, who was still riding high on the attention like it was oxygen. It came from the silence of the Chele. Other fighters, the trainers, even the camera guys who had shown up when word spread that the Titan was about to humiliate some unknown scholarship girl. They were used to watching Cassandra dominate. But this time, they were watching someone who didn't flinch, and that was new. While Cassandra preened for her 2 million follower livestream, flexing for the camera and rehearsing her victory. Speech before a single bell had rung, Amara sat quietly in the locker room, her hands wrapped in borrowed tape, her expression unreadable. That kind of calm wasn't apathy, it was calculation. And Tom Vargas, the gym's veteran owner and former coach to 3 retired champions, saw it immediately. He'd seen a lot of kids walk into his gym over the years. Some came to chase dreams, others to escape nightmares. But Amara, she was different. When he asked her if she was sure she wanted to go through with it, her answer was simple. "She thinks this is a fight," Amara said softly, pulling on her gloves. "But for me, this is a conversation. And I'm about to speak." Her language. Tom didn't reply right away. He watched her footwork for a moment, subtle pivots, controlled breathing, no wasted movement. Not flashy, not wild, just deadly efficient. This wasn't someone trying to prove she belonged. This was someone preparing to show why she always had. Meanwhile, Cassandra was already filming story number 16. "You guys," she said to her followers, "this is going to be brutal. I'm doing this so she learns something. Not everyone deserves to be here." The comments flooded in. Crush her, put her in her place, send her back to wherever. And Cassandra drank them in like fuel. Because for her, the real fight wasn't in the ring, it was in the narrative. If she could embarrass this girl, it would reinforce the hierarchy she had built her brand around. That success belonged to the chosen. That power looked a certain way, dressed a certain way, and came from certain places. But the truth, the real truth, is that fighters like Cassandra forget what it's like to fight for anything but attention. And fighters like Amara never forget what it's like to fight just to survive. There's a chasm between hunger and ego never sees the storm coming. You know what the problem is with people like her? Cassandra said aloud, turning to her manager as they adjusted her gloves. They confuse pain with power. They think because they've had it hard, they can fight. But the ring doesn't care about your sob story. Except she was wrong. The ring does care. Not because it's sentimental, but because it responds to truth. And Amara was the embodiment of that truth, the truth that power isn't loud, it's precise. That pain doesn't make you weak, it makes you sharp. And that sometimes the one who walks in quiet is the one who walks out undefeated. Meanwhile, in the locker room, Tom decided to do what he hadn't done in a long time. He pulled out a clipboard and started taking notes not on Cassandra, but on Amara, because he was beginning to realize he wasn't just watching a newcomer. He was witnessing the return of something long lost in professional sports: authenticity. Amara reminded him of the fighters from back in the day. The ones who didn't trash talk or build empires on branding. The ones who let their fists speak. As the time for the sparring match approached, the gym began to fill not just with members, but with outsiders. Word had traveled fast. The crowd expected a show, a dismantling, a viral takedown. They brought their phones. They brought their bets. They brought their prejudices. What they didn't bring was the imagination to consider that the story might unfold differently. That perhaps the girl with the quiet steps and calloused hands was the storm no one saw coming. Outside the ring, Amara's uncle, Samuel, had just arrived. A former underground fighter in Kingston who now worked security in Queens. Samuel hadn't been in a gym in 5 years. But when he heard the name Cassandra Vale and the word challenge, he got on a bus and didn't stop moving. He entered the gym quietly, nodding to no one until his eyes locked on his niece. "Shadow Strike," he said gently. Amara froze. She hadn't heard that name since Jamaica. "Uncle Sam," she whispered. "I thought you said we were done with this." "We are," he replied. "Unless someone tries to drag you backwards. Then we remind them." He glanced across the gym at Cassandra, who was now filming another video. "She's never seen someone like you. She's used to opponents who want respect, not someone who's already earned it." "I didn't want this," Amara said. "She chose the fight." "And now," Sam replied, "you choose the ending." As the gloves were tightened and the ropes were checked, the crowd began to buzz louder. The cameras rolled. The live stream started. But in the middle of the noise, one girl stood still, her eyes clear, her heart steady, her mind already writing the outcome. And Cassandra? She was still writing captions. The bell hadn't even rung, but in the eyes of many, the fight had already been decided. After all, what chance did a scholarship girl from the Bronx have against a reigning world champion? The audience didn't come for suspense. They came for spectacle. Cassandra Vale, confident and camera-ready, stepped into the ring like a performer entering her stage. Gloves raised, smirking, her body language dripping with the kind of overconfidence that's only possible when you've never truly faced hunger. Amara Lewis entered without fanfare. No warm-up dances, no glares, no raised fists. Just silence and a subtle scan of her surroundings. Her uncle, Sam, leaned in through the ropes just before the match began. "Don't fight her fight," he whispered. "Let her show her hand first. Amara nodded. She already knew. This wasn't about aggression, it was about revelation. The referee, Tom Vargas, called both women to the center of the ring. He gave the usual instructions, but his eyes lingered on Amara just a moment longer, silently acknowledging the storm beneath. The surface. Cassandra leaned in. "Hope you stretched, sweetheart." "This won't last long." Amara simply blinked. She'd heard worse. Much worse. The bell rang. Cassandra lunged forward with the kind of speed that had earned her nickname, the Titan. Throwing 2 quick jabs followed by a hook meant more to intimidate than to connect. But Amara wasn't there. She wasn't anywhere the punch expected. She slipped, weaved, and pivoted so smoothly it almost looked rehearsed. That's when Cassandra's smirk faltered. Not because she missed, but because she felt, for the first time, that she was fighting someone who wasn't afraid. Amara didn't retaliate immediately. She studied. Let Cassandra throw her combinations. Let her reveal the rhythm, the gaps. Let her arrogance become her blueprint. The crowd roared every time Cassandra threw a flashy punch, not realizing they were cheering shadows. No one had landed. And Cassandra, already slightly winded, was growing irritated. That's the thing about arrogance. It doesn't pace itself. It assumes the finish will come quickly. But Amara was built for the long game. She waited. Not because she lacked the skill to strike, but because she understood something most boxers forget: control is power. In the second minute of the round, Cassandra overextended. A right cross meant to dazzle caught nothing but air. That was Amara's opening. In a blur, she snapped a counter jab to Cassandra's ribs, not hard enough to hurt, but sharp enough to say, "I'm here." Cassandra backed up, surprised. It was the first time in years someone had countered her without being overwhelmed. And that's when the murmurs started in the crowd. They weren't loud yet, but they carried a different tone. Not laughter, not mockery, something closer to uncertainty. In the final 20 seconds of the round, Cassandra pushed harder. Her combinations became more frantic. Not because she wanted to end it, but because she suddenly needed to. She couldn't figure this girl out. She was fighting fog. Every punch was answered not with force, but with footwork, with grace, with patience. And as the bell rang to end round 1, Amara stood untouched. Cassandra? Panting, confused, furious. Back in her corner, Cassandra's manager, Reese, leaned in. "You need to knock her out, now." Cassandra snapped back. "She's not even hitting me." "Exactly," Reese said. "She's making you waste energy." And that was the truth. Amara wasn't just fighting Cassandra, she was unraveling her. Across the ring, Uncle Sam knelt beside his niece, handing her water. "You haven't even started," he said. "No," Amara replied, calmly breathing. "She hasn't either." That's the difference between noise and precision. Cassandra had built a career on being loud, on overwhelming, on dominating, on feeding off the fear in her opponents. But what happens when that fear isn't there? When your opponent doesn't flinch? The second round opened with Cassandra charging, swinging for power. But her timing was now off, her ego rattled. And Amara, she let go. Not emotionally, strategically. Her counters began to land, clean, short punches. Uppercuts that snapped Cassandra's head back. A hook that clipped her temple. Nothing wild, nothing theatrical. just clinical disassembly. The crowd shifted. Phones still rolled, but now the commentary was changing. Who is this girl? Where did she learn to fight like that? Cassandra's footwork began to break down. Her balance suffered. And Amara, sensing the tilt, pressed forward, not to dominate, but to finish a conversation Cassandra had started weeks ago with every smug post, every backhanded comment, every assumption about who deserves to be in the ring. The round ended with Cassandra slumped slightly against the ropes, her eyes flicking to the cameras as if silently pleading for them to turn away. But the lenses were still rolling, still broadcasting, still capturing something she hadn't planned for. A reckoning. By the time the third round began, the atmosphere in the gym had transformed from smug anticipation to stunned awe. The energy wasn't just shifting, it had flipped completely. The audience, once salivating at the thought of an easy takedown, now leaned in with silent reverence as if they knew they were witnessing something rare, something real, something that transcended the sport itself. Amara Lewis was no longer the underdog. She was the architect of Cassandra Vale's unraveling. But she wasn't cocky. She didn't smirk. She didn't raise her gloves to the crowd. She stayed quiet, focused, purposeful. That's what made her terrifying. Cassandra's corner was chaos. Reese was barking commands, but Cassandra couldn't hear them, not over the sound of her own racing thoughts, not over the faint ringing in her ears from a perfectly placed counterhook, not over the confusion of what it meant to lose control in a space where she'd always been the authority. Her legs felt heavier, her shoulders stung, her pride shattered, and still her mind clung to denial. This can't be happening. Not to me, not on camera, but it was happening. And the worst part, it wasn't a lucky punch. It wasn't a fluke. It was deliberate. Designed, delivered with terrifying calm by a girl who didn't smile when she landed blows because her fists weren't thrown for vengeance, they were thrown for clarity. Round 3 was the round where Amara decided to show the audience exactly who she was. No more footwork games. No more waiting. The storm arrived. Her combinations were fast, clean, and surgical. Jab, cross, liver shot, pivot, uppercut. Cassandra didn't have time to blink between strikes. Her defensive instincts were gone, burned out from the previous rounds. And the crowd? They weren't cheering anymore, they were silent. They were watching a woman become a symbol. Amara wasn't just defeating Cassandra. She was defeating a system that confused arrogance for excellence, and she was doing it without fanfare, without shouting, without needing the audience's approval. Just fists, just fire, just truth. Cassandra, in one final, desperate attempt, threw a wide haymaker, a punch meant more to preserve ego than strategy. But Amara saw it before it even launched. She ducked, stepped inside, and delivered a brutal 5-punch combo that sent Cassandra stumbling into the ropes. Her legs buckled. She tried to stand, failed. Tom Vargas, eyes wide, stepped in. "That's enough," he said. And just like that, it was over. The gym erupted not with cheers, but with gasps. The kind of noise people make when something sacred has been broken. And make no mistake, Cassandra's reign wasn't ended. It was erased. Amara walked to the center of the ring, not raising her hands in victory, but kneeling briefly to remove her gloves. There was no need to gesture. The truth had been shouted with every strike. Across the ring, Cassandra sat on the mat, her nose bleeding, her heart in pieces, her phone buzzing non-stop with the consequences of a spectacle she had choreographed only. To realize the spotlight can burn just as easily as it flatters, Reese knelt beside her, silent. What could he say? You got beat by someone you called irrelevant. You lost to someone you filmed as a punchline. You underestimated a storm because it arrived in silence. Across the room, Uncle Sam stood with his arms crossed, eyes wet, not from sadness, but from witnessing a prophecy fulfilled. Shadow strike, he whispered, almost reverently. Reporters were already lining up. Phones were pointed. Social media was exploding. But Amara walked past all of it right to Cassandra. She crouched down, looked her in the eye, and said just loud enough for only her to hear, "Next time, don't measure someone's worth by what you see. You might be looking at your replacement." And then she stood and walked away. No fist pump, no backflip, just dignity, just distance. The news headlines would write themselves. Unknown fighter dismantles reigning champ. The Titan falls. Meet Amara Lewis, the storm you didn't see coming. But that wasn't the story. The real story was this. Sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't winning. It's refusing to lose the way they expect you to. It's stepping into their arena and showing them that excellence doesn't need their permission. And as the gym emptied, as Cassandra was helped to her feet and the last echoes of the crowd faded into the hallway, the only sound that lingered was the faint clap of respect from the very people who had doubted Amara an hour before. She hadn't just changed the outcome of a fight. She'd changed the narrative. And in a world built on image, that's the real knockout. 3 months passed, and the world hadn't stopped talking about her. They called her the quiet storm, the shadow strike comeback, the girl who knocked down a brand. But Amara Lewis didn't care much for headlines. Fame had never been the goal. It still wasn't. While the world trended hashtags, she was back in the gym before sunrise, hitting the bags in silence, still sharing a borrowed 1-bedroom in the Bronx, still drinking tap water from a mason jar, still lacing up the same shoes that had once been laughed at. Because while others measured success in likes and contracts, Amara measured it in discipline, in grace, in staying grounded when the world tried to lift or break you. But on the other side of town, the view was different. Cassandra Vale, once a darling of sponsorship deals and press tours, was now a cautionary tale. Her managers dropped her. Her gear endorsements vanished. The viral video of her loss captioned, "Arrogance meets reality," hit 52 million views in the first week. Every attempt she made to reclaim her image only deepened the damage. She posted an apology. It became a meme. She tried to pivot into coaching. No gym wanted her. Even her old sparring partners avoided her like a ghost that reminded them failure could come for anyone, especially those who stopped respecting the ring. She went from flying private to renting a studio with no kitchen in Queens, and yet no one felt sorry for her. Because it wasn't the knockout that ruined Cassandra Vale, it was her refusal to see the humanity in her opponent. The world had watched the fight and understood something deeper. She hadn't just mocked a girl. She'd mocked hunger, perseverance, dignity. And that always comes back. Amara, meanwhile, was beginning to feel the shift. She didn't ask for it, but it came. First, a message from Golden Crest Promotions. Then Undershield, the athletic brand known for championing underdog stories. Then came the documentary crews, the speaking offers, the scholarships in her name. She said no to most of them. Not yet, she told Tom Vargas, who had become more mentor than manager. I'm not done proving this wasn't a fluke. He smiled. You already proved it. You just don't need applause to know it. Still, the offers kept coming. A 3-fight contract worth $2.5 million. A feature story in Sports Illustrated. A commercial shoot that reenacted the moment she ducked Cassandra's. Hook only this time, shot in slow motion and framed like art. But Amara remained centered, because that's what makes someone dangerous in the ring and legendary outside of it. Not the punch, the poise. And when she did accept an interview, finally, for a primetime national audience, she didn't gloat. She didn't talk about her childhood or the pain or the past. She looked directly into the camera and said, "To anyone watching who's ever been dismissed because of where you're from, what you wear, or what they think you can't do, remember, they don't get to write your ending. You do." The crowd stood. It was more than applause. It was relief that someone, somewhere, had finally flipped the script. But the biggest twist came not on television, but in a letter. It arrived on a rainy Wednesday in a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, typed, short. It read, "You didn't just beat me. You taught me. I didn't respect you, and I paid the price. But I see now you deserved everything." Cassandra Amara read it once, then twice. Then folded it gently and placed it in a box beside her bed. She didn't feel satisfaction. She didn't feel pity. What she felt was closure. Because the story wasn't about defeating Cassandra Vale. It never was. It was about proving that power isn't how hard you hit. It's how hard you refuse to be defined by anyone else's limits. And that's why, when she walked out for her professional debut a month later, people didn't just cheer. They stood. Not because she was undefeated, but because she had never needed a record to validate her worth. The fight lasted 2 rounds. Her opponent? A ranked lightweight from Argentina, experienced, tall, arrogant. But he made the same mistake Cassandra did. He assumed. And assumptions fall fast when they meet hunger. Amara dropped him with a body shot so fast the commentators had to ask for replay. But when the ref raised her hand, she didn't smile. Just nodded once, because this wasn't a celebration. It was a statement. I'm not done yet. After the match, a young girl in the audience approached her backstage, 10 years old. Braided hair. Holding a worn notebook. "Ms. Lewis," she whispered, "I watched you fight Cassandra. My teacher said you were brave." Amara knelt. "Do you want to fight too?" The girl shook her head. "No, I want to be a judge. I want to make sure people like you get treated fair." Amara smiled for the first time that night. Because that's what impact looks like, not in trophies or headlines, but in the ripples we create by standing in truth. Her foundation, Stormlight, launched weeks later, offering scholarships, legal aid, and free training for girls from underserved neighborhoods. The first facility opened in Montego Bay. Her mother cut the ribbon. Her uncle held the gloves. And the crowd? They weren't there for a champion. They were there for a mirror. Because Amara Lewis had become what so many people never get to. See someone who looks like them, sounds like them, and proves every day that dignity doesn't require permission. It demands presence. And while the world kept scrolling, she kept showing up, not to impress, but to remind. The storm doesn't ask for attention. It arrives in silence and leaves everything changed. 6 months later, the narrative had settled, but the ripples hadn't. Amara Lewis, once mocked as an overreaching scholarship girl, now stood atop an empire she never sought to build. Not a corporate one, a cultural one. She'd become something. More than an athlete, she was a signal fire. Her fight against Cassandra Vail wasn't just archived on YouTube. It was taught in university lectures on media ethics and power dynamics. Her quote, "You don't get to write my ending," had become a tattoo, a t-shirt slogan, a mural on the side of a boxing center in Johannesburg. But ask Amara about any of it, and her answer never changed. The fight was never against her, she'd say. It was against the idea that people like me aren't enough. What made her victory unforgettable wasn't just that she won, it was how she won, with composure, with craft, with an almost uncomfortable refusal to be baited into anger, because that's what so many expected, that she'd come out swinging, wild, with something to prove. Instead, she reminded the world that the most dangerous fighter in the room is the one who doesn't need to be loud. But Cassandra's story didn't disappear, not entirely. She re-emerged online in small ways. She joined a fitness app as a contributor. She posted a video titled, "What I Learned the Hard Way." And, to her credit, she never blamed anyone but herself. "I didn't just lose the fight," she said in one clip. "I lost who I was pretending to be." And that might be the greatest lesson I could have asked for. The comment section was split. Some forgave, some never would. But Amara? She didn't comment. When asked in an interview what she thought about Cassandra's attempt at redemption, she simply said, "Everyone gets a second round. What they do with it is their call." The humility of that line carried weight, because Amara never needed to step on Cassandra to rise. She had already built something higher. Her gym, Stormlight, now had 3 branches: Montego Bay, the Bronx, and New Orleans. Over 400 girls had enrolled. Some learned to box. Some didn't. All of them learned to defend their space, to name their worth, to recognize that silence is not consent, it's strategy. One girl, 12-year-old Maya, wrote in her scholarship essay, "I used to think I had to be angry to be strong. But Amara showed me I could be calm and still command respect." That essay was read aloud at the Stormlight Scholarship Gala, where Amara, in a simple navy suit and no makeup, stood quietly off stage, wiping away a tear as Maya spoke. Because that was the point. Not glory, not gold, just impact. Amara's second professional fight was held in Las Vegas, bigger venue, louder lights, new pressure. Her opponent this time, a Brazilian sensation with 9 wins and no losses, backed by a global sports brand and a trash-talk-heavy pre-fight promo campaign. The night before the match, a reporter asked her, "What do you say to people who think your first win was a fluke?" Amara looked him in the eye and replied, "Flukes don't train at 5 a.m. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. When the bell rang the next night, she didn't flinch. In round 1, she tested. In round 2, she adjusted. In round 3, she ended it with a body shot that left her opponent gasping on the mat, not out of brutality, but out of a rhythm so clean, so studied, so silent that it looked like music. The crowd went wild, but Amara didn't bask. She walked to her corner, nodded to her coach, and hugged her mother, who had flown in from Montego Bay to watch for the first time. Her post-fight interview was broadcast live. The reporter asked, "What's the biggest difference between you and your opponents?" Amara paused, then smiled slightly. "They want to win. I want to serve." That line echoed across media because it reframed the conversation. She wasn't building a career. She was building space. Safe space. Honest space. Space for others to breathe. That's why it mattered. Not because she fought, but because she fought for something bigger than herself. In the final month of that year, Amara was invited to speak at a leadership summit in Geneva. CEOs, activists, and world leaders attended. Her speech was only 8 minutes, but it was the most viewed segment of the entire event. In it, she said, "I'm not here because I threw the best punch. I'm here because I showed up when I wasn't. Invited, stayed when I was mocked, and stood firm when others tried to shrink me. That's leadership, and that's power." The audience gave her a standing ovation, but she didn't smile for the camera. She walked off stage, took a breath, and texted Sam, still learning, still grounded. Back in New York, Cassandra Vale saw the speech. She turned off the screen, stared out the window, and whispered, "She really did it," because she finally understood. Amara had never tried to destroy her. She had tried to rise, and that's what real strength does. It doesn't tear down, it transcends. Months later, when Amara won her 3rd straight fight and became a top contender for the world title, she was asked what winning the belt would mean to her. Her answer, "Less than what I've already done." Because for Amara Lewis, the belt was never the point. Dignity was. And she had earned it inch by inch, round by round, with fists forged not in rage, but in resilience. This wasn't just a story about boxing. It was about what happens when a woman walks into a room built to reject her and claims space anyway. Amara Lewis didn't win because she was the strongest in the ring. She won because she had already done the harder thing, refusing to believe the lie that she didn't belong. In a world that rewards volume, she chose precision. In a system that privileges arrogance, she led with grace. And in a culture obsessed with spectacle, she brought something more enduring: substance. Her story reminds us that dignity is not something others grant you. It's something you defend every single day with the choices you make and the character you carry. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to destroy to be seen. Sometimes all you need is to stay steady, stay ready, and wait for the moment when the storm inside you becomes impossible to ignore. Amara didn't just beat an opponent, she changed the arena. And the greatest victories aren't the ones we win for ourselves. They're the ones that open the door wider for everyone who comes next.